ready to get started here. Well, good morning, or rather good afternoon. My name's Tommy Johnson. I'm with the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to today's special event, Food for Thought, Embracing Innovation. The Portland Regional Chamber is proud to partner with our friends at the University of Maine's Portland Gateway and Office of Innovation and Economic Development to bring you a three-part event series focused on the topic of food. Every other week from now through June 22nd on Wednesdays at noon, we'll deliver a unique presentation that's focused on the topic of food as it relates to our community. The goal is to help reshape the mindset of how we must continually evolve our understanding and habits through the lens of food utilization. Now, today's topic, Embracing Innovation, will feature representatives from two Maine businesses that aren't afraid to try new things, Maine Grains and Wymans. Here to moderate today is Rob Dumas, Food Science Innovation Coordinator at the University of Maine. Now, this topic and its relevance are clearly evident as we have over 55 people registered today, so welcome to all of you. Like all of the Chamber's virtual events, today's presentation is free and will be recorded and made available for free replay on the Chamber's website and YouTube page. To keep up to date on all the Chamber's news and events, please visit our website, portlandregion.com. Check out our events page and sign up for our weekly email newsletter while you're there. Now, before we get to today's presentation, I'd like to remind you that if you have any questions for our panel, please type them in the Zoom chat below, and I'll relay them to our presenters at the end of the presentation. At this point, I'd like to introduce Chef Rob Dumas. Chef Rob brings 20 years of experience in the hospitality industry and is a certified executive chef with the American Culinary Federation. He has a diverse background ranging from cooking for the 44th president and the first family to teaching culinary arts and meat fabrication at the New England Culinary Institute. His current roles with the University of Maine and University of Maine Cooperative Extension allow him to focus on his passion for local and seasonal food while working as a resource to the state's agricultural industries. Please join me in welcoming Chef Rob Dumas. Take it away, Rob.
Thank you very much, Tommy. I really appreciate the introduction. And I'm so excited to be here today and to share some of what I get really excited about in my position, which is innovation in food in Maine and the incredible companies that we have here. Today, we're going to be talking about Wymans and Maine Grains, and I'm joined here today with Patrick Carroll and AmberLambke. I'll start out with Amber, and I'll give a little bit of a personal intro. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Maine Grains is an incredible business in Skowhegan, Maine. It was founded by Amber as and I'll give her a little bit of time to talk about the history and the context of Maine Grains and the impetus to starting it. But we're very excited to have Amber today. We're also joined by Pat Carroll from Wymans. Pat is the Vice President of Marketing and Sales at Wymans, and Pat will be able to share a little bit about Wymans' history and a little bit about himself as well. So Amber, I'll go ahead and kick it over to you. And if you would take a few minutes to share a little bit about your background and a little bit about the background of Maine Grains, that would be wonderful.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Rob. Good to see you again, Patrick, and great to be with you all. Maine Grains is a grist mill in the center of historic downtown Skowhegan, and we repurposed, believe it or not, an old county jail building in the center of town in order to revive the infrastructure that makes it possible to process locally grown grains. We launched our business in 2012, and this year we are 10 years old. And the idea for the business really grew out of grassroots conversations that began back in 2007 around why local grains were missing from our local food conversations and our farmers markets and our bakeries. And so a grassroots group of us decided it would be helpful to convene farmers, millers, bakers, brewers, and everyone in between, kind of viewing grains as a cluster of interconnected goods and services and farmers to figure out what it would take to revive Maine's grain economy. Now, we were still growing grains in the state at that time, largely as a cover crop. And the University of Maine Cooperative Extension was beginning to work extensively with Maine's organic dairy farms to grow some grains for the purpose of feed and straw. And so we piggybacked on some of those conversations to launch the first ever kneading conference, KNEAD. And those conversations really jump-started a movement, if you will. We realized that we had some grains in the state, and one of the biggest obstacles was the ability to clean and process those grains into food grade products. So it took a couple of years of business planning and a couple of years of sort of getting our courage up to accept that it might be us to solve this problem here in Skowhegan. And we launched our mill in 2012. So we specialize in using stone milling equipment that is sourced from Austria. We have oat dehulling machinery from Germany. Our newest equipment now is a color sorter that can clean and sort grains using a laser eye technology on the basis of the color of the kernels. So we've built essentially the ability to precision clean here in Maine, and it makes food grade products available to bakers, brewers, chefs, and home cooks all across the Northeast. So we're a growing company. As I said, over 10 years, we've grown quite a bit. Innovation is at the heart of what we're about. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. And we're really pleased to be serving the needs of folks in the Northeast from Maine to New York City.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amber. I'm going to hand it over to Pat, and then I'll have a couple questions for both of you.
Great. Thanks, Rob, and good to see you too, Amber. So Wymans is a little bit on the different end of the spectrum from Maine Grains. We've been around for 147 years. The company was started by Jasper Wyman. Actually, Jasper started the company as a canning facility for sardines and seafood. It wasn't until a few years later that we started realizing that Washington County has a lot of great opportunities to pick wild blueberries, and Jasper started canning those. Over our 147-year history, we have continued to grow our business. We largely were in the canning business for a number of years, canning wild blueberries and then distributing them around the world. And our canning operation is still up and running today. If you go and you buy a wild blueberry kit from Duncan Hines or from Krusteaz or places like that, and you get a little can of wild blueberries in there, that's Wymans and our fruit that's in those cans. Since then, we've diversified the portfolio and got into retail. We probably got into retail offerings about 20 or so years ago with IQF fruit. IQF just stands for individually quick frozen fruit. And we now are proud to say that we're the #1 frozen fruit brand in the US. We're actually bigger than Dole. So that's something that we're extremely proud of, that we've been able to beat the big corporate conglomerate in Dole, at least in this one category. Look, Dole's bigger than us when you count fresh and frozen and all the other stuff that they do, but at least in the frozen category, we're #1. So I've been with the company for 5 years, and I was brought in to help accelerate the awareness of wild blueberries and to ensure that Wymans is a household name across the country, and then also to try and innovate the products that we offer so that we can have a diversified offering. So in case we ever have a bad year with wild blueberries, there's something else to fall back on. And also just to try and create more opportunities for Mainers. We're big in Washington County. I want to say we're the 3rd or 4th biggest employer in Washington County. And we like to make sure that there's plenty of jobs and opportunities for those people, for the next 147 years. So it's a fun, exciting place to work. And we've had the pleasure of working with people like Rob on developing new products that we're hoping to get into the market over the next, call it 6 to 12 months.
Thank you, Pat. I really appreciate that context. And I'd love to follow up to both of your introductions with just a couple of questions. And Amber, I wanted to start out and just ask you to share a little bit, or I've been curious, and I thought the answer was really interesting. What was your professional background prior to starting Maine Grains?
Oh, thanks for asking, Rob. So I didn't mention that, but my background is as a trained speech language pathologist. I have a master's in communication disorders. So really, I come to grains and this work organically, if you will, initially as a community volunteer. Skowhegan is one of many Main Street communities in the state of Maine. So a community that's been designated by the National Trust for Historic Preservation as a community that would receive support for revitalization of its downtown. I became involved in 2015 with that effort as a volunteer. I was initially asked if I would throw some time behind helping our farmers market to grow bigger and to help market the market to our population here. And so really in so doing, I became familiar with what the opportunities and challenges were and are for farmers in my region. I also engaged in a lot of event planning and fundraising on behalf of Main Street. So I came to understand how the community comes together around a common idea. And it was through the farmers market that we realized that bakers were in a quandary about meeting the market rules to grow or produce everything that they brought to market to sell. That was a problem. And markets across the Northeast were saying, geez, what do we do about banana bread made with white flour, bananas, white sugar? What does that have to do with farmers markets and local food? And it was a good question, and it really stimulated some of the thinking behind starting the Kneading Conference. So I'm no longer a speech pathologist. I did reach a point after building the business plan for Maine Grains that I was all in and there was no going back. But I do tell people that, my skill set from a prior life comes in very, very handy with my current work now. Everything from complex problem solving to task analyses and a lot of the HR and management duties that I have now. So very different. I had a prior life.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Amber. I have found that fascinating too. And I really loved how you talked about the aspect of community revitalization and how Maine Grains has played a role in that. And I know from some of my personal network that you've made it a big priority to hire local young people and give them opportunities to step up in roles at Maine Grains. Would you share a little bit about your team at Maine Grains and some of the folks that have you've made an opportunity for them to stay local and stay here in Maine?
Sure. Milling is, particularly stone milling, has been a dying art. It is rapidly coming back. But when we started this business in 2012, there was no place to go formally learn or train in the art of stone milling. The only education happening in the world, it was really white flour milling. So it was peer-to-peer networks that we were going to learn how to stone mill and did. And what that means for local hiring is that we don't need people, and we don't expect to hire people who have stone milling background. But what we do need are people who want to work with their hands, will do manual labor happily, know mechanics. And we now have 20 employees that span milling employees to customer service and sales and marketing, and a business manager. So we've grown quite a bit. The real joy for me has been that we are located in a rural community that has people that have worked in paper mills and shoe shops over the years. And one of the reasons why we're working on downtown revitalization is the loss of a lot of those industrial manufacturing jobs over the years. But some of those skill sets are still here. So we've been able to employ people who used to work in paper mills and have a lot of applicable skills to what we're doing now. And we all learn together on the flour front or on the grain front. Same thing with agriculture. Anyone who's worked on a farm has worked really hard. They've worked around machinery. They understand how to produce quality crops and what goes into the crop rotations that grow healthy food. And so having that knowledge base here in rural Maine is really helpful to a business like mine. So I know we're going to talk more about innovation, but I do think that this idea that we do need to imagine the skill sets of the people in our community that want jobs right where we are, and work to employ them and put their best talents to work. And we've certainly done that here at Maine Grains. We've also been creative and innovative about how to grow and meet the needs of our employees through wellness benefits and flexible schedules in order to retain folks. So thanks. Great question, Rob.
Awesome. I only have one more question for you, Amber, and then I'll put Pat on the hot seat. But this is something that I think makes your product really unique and really special, and that is the aspect of it being a grist mill. And I think some of the listeners today might benefit from understanding the difference between the type of milling that you're doing and what's happening out in the larger kind of commodity farms in the Midwest.
Great question. So there was a time when all of our small rural communities would have had grist mills where machinery or stones were being used to break down grain and corn into animal feed and human grade products. And cultures all across the world have used stone on stone, stone rubbing against stone in one fashion or another to grind grains into a meal that can be used for tortilla or bread or chapati or you name it. But this, the use of stone mills was a dying art, largely because they're slower. And also because when you stone mill, you are milling the entirety of the kernel into the flour, which means you have the bran, the germ, and the endosperm of the seed in your finished product. Well, the germ is where all of the essential sort of good nutrition and fatty oils reside in a seed. And those oils are what will cause a flour to go rancid over time if it sits on a store shelf for too long. So we really changed the technology and the way we make flour in this country to largely roller milling technology, where you're using steel rolls that that take kernels and shear them or flatten them in order to pulverize the endosperm into what we think of as white flour, and be able to separate and remove the bran in sheets, and also remove the germ, which would extend shelf life on a white flour product. So the majority of the flour that is produced in an industrial way right now is roller milled to make white flour, to be able to remove the parts of the kernel that would cause rancidity, but also happen to be the most nutritious parts of the kernel. So in my journey here, I did set out to learn more about milling and ended up at the Kansas State University's International Grains Program for a week-long course. It was only one of two places to learn about milling in the world. It's Kansas or Switzerland at that time. And there was not a single book in the library of the International Grains Program on stone milling. So it was a helpful course for me to learn the specs and quality parameters and safety parameters of milling. But I was not able to learn anything about stone milling there, and really discovered that would be a peer-to-peer networks that we would build across the world to learn what we're doing. Fortunately, I will close just in sharing that the landscape of stone milling is changing rapidly. And in recent years, a new company has started in Vermont, the New American Stone Mill Company, that is the first in our country to be making large format 4-foot diameter millstones again. And they're selling them like mad to bakers and millers all over the world. And so there is a resurgence of an interest in freshly milling grains right before baking. And that's a wonderful movement to see happening, and one that actually supports our business. We can sell those customers the whole berry and let them do the milling themselves. So it's a wonderful movement to be tracking and watching spread like wildfire.
That's so cool, Amber. Thank you so much for sharing, and what an exciting time to be alive in the grain world. Mm-hmm. So Pat, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions because I think that it's very eye-opening to learn about how big Wyman's reach is nationwide. And I was wondering if you would share a little bit about some of your retail partners that you have, and where you can find Wyman's products throughout the U.S.
Sure. Look, in the retail space, we've been very fortunate that the message that we're putting out there about the amazing wild blueberry and the taste and the nutritional benefits of the wild blueberry is really resonating nationwide. So we're in just about every major retailer you could imagine, coast to coast. There's a couple of small holdouts, but I'd say they're, one or, less than the fingers on your hand. So that's been very exciting. Our big retailers are kind of the usual suspects, the Walmarts, the Targets of the world, but we love our local retailers too. We love Hannaford and Shaw's and Market Basket and places like that. So Big Y. We're very fortunate that we've got a national footprint at this time. Our business is segmented into three pieces. We have the retail piece, the ingredient piece, which I kind of talked about before, where we're an ingredient going into something else like the canned line, and then a food service part of the business, servicing local restaurants and even some sort of regional restaurants. We don't have I'd say a strong national footprint on the food service side of things, but on the ingredient and on the retail side of things, we most certainly do.
Thank you, Pat. That's really really amazing that I could be in Washington State eating a Maine wild blueberry. I think
Absolutely.
So I was wondering, to support that nationwide retail system, where are all of Wyman's fields located? I guess what's your presence, statewide or throughout the Northeast?
Yeah, so wild blueberries are unique in that they really only grow in abundance in Maine and Eastern Canada. So we have fields anywhere from a half hour north of Portland, sort of all the way up to the Canadian border, and then we have other fields in Canada as well. But I'd say the split is probably close to 50-50 in terms of our fields in the U.S. or on the Canadian side of the border, and then. In terms of our bagging line's in Cherryfield, Maine. So, and I always get a kick out of the fact that, our factory's in Cherryfield, Maine versus Wild Blueberry, Maine, but that's probably a story for a different day.
There you go. There you go. It should be Blueberry Field, Maine instead of Cherryfield. I like it. So one last question about wild blueberries, and then we'll move on into innovation. So I think it would be interesting just to share, what makes a wild blueberry different from what you buy, in the produce department in that little clamshell, the high bush blueberries, and what does wild blueberry agriculture look like in terms of the cycle of picking and that? I think that's really interesting for folks that may not know.
Yeah. So look, wild blueberries aren't planted. They've been growing in the area for the last 10,000 years or so. So really, our goal is just to eliminate any extremes that the plant might have to endure. Meaning, if there's a drought, we try and put water on the plant, things like that. Our goal is really to touch the plant as little as possible, because Mother Nature really has done some of her finest work on this fruit, and so our job is really just not to screw it up. Compared to a cultivated blueberry, so a cultivated blueberry actually originally a bunch of guys down at Rutgers University took some high bush blueberries from Maine and really started trying to engineer the fruit in order to try and make something that was big and heavy, because farmers get paid by the pound, and they wanted something with a thick skin, because the thicker the skin, the less damage you have in transporting it and so forth. So they were successful, and back in the 50s, they came up with a plant that could basically be put anywhere on Earth, and you could grow it. The challenge is if you take a plant and you stick it in a location that it's not normally supposed to be, the dinner bell is usually ringing for a lot of pests, and so you typically have to apply a lot of pesticides and fertilizers and all sorts of things that the plant normally would rely on. You have to bring it to the plant and help it fight off from the other insects and animals that might be in the area. With the wild blueberry, Mother Nature took care of most of that for us. Through 10,000 years of evolution, if you make your way out to Washington County, which is where the sort of heartbeat of the blueberry industry is, you'll see acres upon acres upon acres of land that just sprawl. And as you look at those acres, you'll see that depending upon the time of the year, you'll see that if you look at the flowers in the spring, some of the flowers are different colored than other flowers. Those are all unique individual plants. So it really is sort of Darwinism at its finest, that a bee comes along and cross-pollinates plant A and plant B, and now that creates a new fruit. The fruit goes into the ground, and you have a new plant AB. And so, you do that over 10,000 years, you create a really dynamic system. And we think that that's one of the things that's amazing about it, because throughout 10,000 years, there have been droughts and fires and all sorts of things that have happened to the land. And despite all of that, the plant still thrives. We actually don't know, there are more things we probably don't know about the plant than we do. For example, we don't even know how old the plants are. We suspect that they can grow to be 250 years old, but no one's quite sure, because no one's been around long enough to count and to really identify the plants over time. But it's a plant that lives largely underground. About 2/3 of the plant lives underground, and really just the stalks come up to bear fruit. And that's one of the reasons why it survives the harsh winters here in Maine and Canada, because if the whole plant was sitting above ground, I think it would have a really hard time. And in the winter, we're all praying for snow. We like to have a good foot or two of snow on top of the fruit, because it could be really cold on top of the snow, but underneath the snow, you're sort of regulated at about 32 degrees. So it's a good way to protect the plants and make sure that they're thriving for the future. But it's a really amazing crop, and we're part of the Wild Blueberry Commission and WBANA, which is the Wild Blueberry Association of North America. There is a Wild Blueberry Festival that we're going to be in our second year. And I believe it's at the end of July, if I remember correctly. So anyone that has the opportunity, go to the WBANA or the Wild Blueberry Commission website and look us up and come up for a visit. I think you'll be in for quite a treat.
Fantastic, Pat. Thank you so much for the really interesting look at what makes a wild blueberry different. I appreciate that. So I want to bring us into the next segment of this conversation, and that's company innovation, because that's really what we're here to talk about today. Is what are companies here in Maine doing to embrace innovation and address the challenges that they're facing and address opportunities to grow. So I was wondering if each of you would be willing to share a little bit about some of the innovative work that you're doing and why it's important to you and your business. And Pat, I'll have you kind of go ahead and jump in first, and if you want to take about 4 minutes to talk about Wyman's innovation.
Sure. So look, Wyman's, we're happy with where we're at, but we think there's still a lot of meat on the bone, if you will. And we want to create more opportunities for good paying jobs in the state of Maine and beyond. As a farmed crop, there are good years and there are bad years. And so in order to help diversify away from the bad years, it's always helpful to have other products and other fruits available to us to try and keep things on the rails. So we think that bagged fruit does have has a good future ahead. It's been around for a long time, and to be honest, in times of inflation, when money gets tight, bagged frozen fruit is a better value than fresh fruit. So we're cautiously optimistic that people will make the switch from fresh to frozen in order to keep the business rolling at a good pace. That said, the whole world isn't just bagged fruit. There are other ways to consume fruit, and there's other ways to eat wild blueberries, and we'd like to be part of that. So most recently, we launched a product. I'm not sure if you guys can see it on the screen, but it's a product that basically is whole and diced pieces of fruit with, for lack of a better word, Dippin' Dots of either Greek yogurt or banana puree. And that's an item now that we actually do have a national distribution. It gives us some diversity and There are 4 cups in that box that I showed you, and about a third of the cup is wild blueberries, but the other 2/3 are bananas and strawberries, which again helps diversify our business. In innovation, trying to get people to experience our product, our wild blueberries in a different way is always something that's beneficial to us. We want to get that Maine story out. We want to get the wild blueberry story out. So the more ways that we can kind of introduce people to wild blueberries, the better. And so it's something that we're very proud of. We're looking to do more innovations. We actually, in full disclosure, we're working with Rob on a number of them actively as we speak, in order to come up with even more. We think that the world wants to eat more fruit. Only about 8 out of 10 people in the U.S. do not eat enough fruits and vegetables every day, and so we're hoping to help provide solutions to close that gap. And so we're coming up with a bunch of things that we feel that products need to be healthy and convenient and taste good. And so if you can kind of take those 3 axes and meld them together, there's still a lot of white space out there to create products that are healthy, nutritious, and convenient, and taste great. And we hope to fill some of those needs to try and make sure that for the next 147 years, the people that work at Wymans have something to do.
Thank you, Pat. That's wonderful. And I'm very excited to be working with you, by the way. It's a lot of fun. Amber, if you want to take a few minutes to talk about some of the innovation at Maine Grains and why it's important to you and your business, that'd be great.
Sure. I think this sounds simple and quite obvious, but perhaps the first innovation that led to our business was the idea of relocalizing grain production. And that grew out of a realization that it might be more economical. We might be able to produce grain cheaply and process it more cheaply if it was centralized in the Midwestern part of the United States. But what we lost when we lost regional grain economies was all of the other fringe benefits of growing grain on the farm. And so we lost the use of grains to manage manure. So dairy farms now have to manage manure pits, but grains are heavy nitrogen feeders and they need a lot of that nitrogen. Animal husbandry requires straw and bedding, and grain plants, which are grasses, provide a lot of that for us. Grains are a cover crop that allow us to manage perennial weeds without the use of chemicals. So I could go on, but that was our first innovation. Was it's not enough to let go of grain production because it might be more expensive to grow it here. There's all kinds of other fringe benefits. So again, looking at grains as a cluster, the state of Maine and the Brookings Institution in 2016 had advocated Maine focusing on key economic clusters and the development of those clusters for a thriving state and for job creation. And we read that report and thought, well, grains is a cluster. You need farmers, you need millers, you need bakers and researchers and brewers and everyone in between. So, even our byproducts are something that are now utilized by our community. Everything from the oat hulls that we crack off of an oat, they're getting turned into cat litter by an entrepreneur. They're getting turned into a medium that can grow mushrooms. They're useful to the Amish. They're useful to the folks running dog kennels and horse barns. And so really thinking of grains as a cluster and all of the goods and byproducts that it produces being useful is part of the innovation. We're obviously interested in innovating new products. Really, we launched our core business on the basis of making flour for bakers and rolled oats, and later bought innovative equipment that could do the processing that would scour a tough bran coat, for example, on barley or spelt, to be able to create new products like farro and pearl barley, which opened up entirely new market channels for us with chefs and cooks. We're now in a development, thanks to a partnership with you, Rob, and the University of Maine, developing even yet more products that take our core products, flour and grains, and turn them into convenient ready-made products that have an additional value add. So baking mixes or seasoned grains. We know that one of the market channels we're not yet serving well yet is the customer base that is less comfortable in the kitchen, baking from scratch, or needs a quicker meal because it's a busy family and they would like to add water to their grains, cook, and call it a meal. So we know we can make that easier, and we're working on that. That will be one of our new product lines that we aim to launch in the coming year. It has driven our research in the world of innovative packaging. You know, we are under pressure as food producers now to be packaging in sustainably responsible and compostable ways. And how do you do that and still keep the food safe and airtight and pest-free and all of that? So there's a lot of research going on here at Maine Grains right now around those products. And lastly, I'll just say that we have more innovation to do in grains. I'm just fresh back from a trip to the UK, where I got to spend time on farms and with seed researchers that are planting population wheats, which essentially means mixing a wide variety of wheat varieties and planting them all in the same row together as a blend. And that is helping to build seed resilience in the face of climate change. It's helping to provide some insurance in a given crop year. If one variety succumbs to disease pressure or climate pressure, then perhaps other varieties in the population will still do okay. And we're not seeing that happening here in the US, albeit only on very small test plots. So I think we have more innovating to do in the grain world to keep thinking about how we build a sustainable future for grains.
Wow, that's so fascinating. What a unique approach happening there in the UK. Well, wonderful. Well, I just have a couple of questions. And Pat, I wanted to ask you, what retail category are you targeting with Wymans? Where is a lot of your innovation trying to land on the shelves at your local retailer, and why?
Most of our innovation is looking to stay in the frozen category. There's typically 2, 3, 4 aisles of frozen, depending upon what store you go into. We're really good at frozen. There are a lot of barriers to frozen that we think can help keep other competitors away from going into frozen. We think frozen's going to grow in the future. If you look at the millennial consumer, they have a lot of concerns about spoilage and waste and things like that. Frozen does a really good job of addressing that, and so we think that that's a space that we want to keep our expertise in. Areas like refrigerated. That one we have no experience in, and it scares me to death. And so it's a space that I really don't want to get into. Shelf stable is certainly interesting, and gosh, sometimes when I go to a grocery store and I see pallets of frozen products sitting out in the aisle waiting for someone to stick it into a freezer, I keep on thinking to myself, boy, wouldn't it be great if I was just shelf stable? I can just leave it out there forever. But I'd say frozen is the place we have expertise in. We have a supply chain for, and largely where we plan on being for a long time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pat. Amber, I found it really, really interesting as somewhat of a agricultural groupie to hear you talking about the use of grains as kind of a cover crop. What I found interesting in your product line is the use of a nitrogen fixing plant rather than a nitrogen hungry plant. And I was wondering if you'd share a little bit about your crop rotation line of products, and maybe kind of go into the other side of that, rotational cropping scheme that farmers use.
Sure. So again, just to reiterate that point, grains are grass and they're a heavy nitrogen feeder in the soil. So they suck up a lot of nitrogen for the soil. So they really want to be planted either with or in rotation with plants that will put nitrogen back into the soil. So in an organic system, you'll often see grain growers undersow things like clover or peas with the grain crop, because the clover stays low and it's putting nitrogen into the soil and it's building higher protein count in the grains. But when the grains are ripe, you come along with a combine and you cut them off the top. And then you've got the clover left behind that you can either let die or till in to improve soil health. Oats, peas, beans, and barley grow, right? As the song goes. Those are complementary crops in the field together. Peas, beans, barley, oats, they rotate well. So knowing that we wanted to support the organic practices of our farms, we launched a line of crop rotation dry beans several years ago to help market the dry beans that we were encouraging our farmers to grow. And those are selling very, very well. I mean, heritage beans have their own following. And again, that opens up a new market for us and helps us to support farms. I think on this notion, I'll tell a quick story just about oats as cover crop. I mean, many of you have gardens and you may sprinkle your garden beds with oat seed or rye seed or even buckwheat seed to manage weed growth or suppress weed growth and improve soil health while you're giving your garden a break. And one of our first pieces of machinery was an Oat Dehuller that was originally made in Iowa in the 1930s. And we were having troubles with that machine getting the oats completely free of their hulls and a nice sort of chaff-free rolled oat product. So we were in touch with the company manufacturer of the machines and we said, we're using your Roskamp Dehuller to make oatmeal. And we got a chuckle on the other end of the phone. And the guy said, well, you know, my grandpa invented that machine in the 1930s when everybody was growing oats because nobody was yet using chemicals to kill weeds. So there was a glut of oats. All farmers grew oats, but we didn't know what to do with them. So the machine that dehulled oats for the first time helped to fatten pigs up faster by removing fiber from pig feed so that they could develop a hog market and take hogs to market faster. So his chuckle was that we never invented this machine for boutique applications like yours. You know, we developed the machine to remove fiber from oats. So just illustrative of it's not that long ago, agriculturally speaking, that all farms used grains for soil management. And so it's part of what we're promoting, and it's part of how we're trying to tell our story through the products we sell.
Oh, very cool, Amber. Thank you for that little story. That's fun. So I want to jump into the next question around innovation. And I wanted to ask you and Pat a little bit about your impetus for innovation and the resources that you leveraged and or the tools or networks here in Maine that helped foster or support your innovation. I'd love to hear about things like, funding sources, associations you might have found helpful or useful to work with, as well as other organizations in the state that gave you support in your journey with innovation. And Pat, we'll kick it to you to answer this one first, and then we'll have Amber follow up.
Sure, Rob. I actually was hoping you were going to go to Amber first because I hate to say it, but I was multitasking there. There was a question in the comment area that I was answering. I'm sorry, what's the question again?
So it's what are the resources you've leveraged here in Maine? What has the innovation landscape looked like? What have been the kind of key tools and resources that have helped you move forward with your innovative strategies?
So the biggest resource, honestly, has been Rob and the University of Maine. When we started coming up with innovative concepts, we were struggling with recipes and how to actually produce and machine these things. There are in the food industry, I think you run into everyone has an idea. And everyone has oh, grandma used to do this, and my neighbor makes this, and why don't you guys do that? But to try and turn that into a proper product and a scalable product is something that's very difficult. And so trying to find chefs that have the ability to create a product that can be mass produced over and over and over again and run through a machine is something that is hard to find. And so working with Rob at the University of Maine has been a big help. There are certainly other companies that you can go to out there to find executive chefs and things like that will help you design and develop products. But it's great having someone in-house. In the past, we had used a company up in Canada called Canada's Smartest Kitchen, and they're in Prince Edward Island, conveniently located from Portland, on a 11-hour drive away. So it was one of those things that I would much rather drive up to UMaine than to PEI to try and do meetings and innovation. The trick from there is, we're constantly trying to push the boundaries and try and create products that can't easily be replicated. So if you want to make a pie or a muffin or some other sort of traditional thing that blueberries are found in, there are a lot of companies out there that can do that, and just swapping in a blueberry for some other fruit really isn't what we're looking to do. What we want to try and do is create a delivery system that is really unique, and that gets us into trouble because the companies that are out there for making the products that are currently in the market, and you're trying to create something that's not in the market to be unique and differentiated. And so what that really requires us to do is do a lot of smiling and dialing with companies that we think kind of have the capabilities or would be open to creating a partnership and try and develop something. And again, I'd say we strike out more than we have hits, but honestly, I don't know a better way of doing it. There are companies that we have talked to. There's a company out of Chicago called 50 Gazelles. They're kind of a matchmaking company that would work with a brand to try and connect the dots to here's my idea, help me figure out how to put it together. And we've had some success with that, but it certainly is not perfect. They just happen to have a bigger Rolodex than we do. But it's a lot of smiling and dialing. The state of Maine, I'd love to do all of my production and do everything out of the state of Maine. There's just not enough co-packers in the state of Maine to do everything. So we try and stay then within New England. If we can't do it within New England, then we try and do it, East Coast. If we can't do it East Coast, then we try and just keep it in the US. So it's a very difficult, very difficult scenario out there for us to try and make a product that can be ideally mass produced and sold to the Walmarts and Targets and big retailers of the world. We typically do not go after ideas that hey, this would be a great opportunity for Rosemont Bakery. Rosemont's great, but they have like 20 locations or something like that. And honestly, if we're going to spend company resources, we want to get something that has a real opportunity to get to 10, 20, $30 million in sales. And if we don't believe it has the opportunity to do that, then generally we don't chase it. But it's probably the hardest part of my job is to not necessarily come up with ideas, but to come up with the formulas that could be replicated and find co-packers that would be willing to work with us. The flip side of that is to go out and buy a whole bunch of machinery, and that's just a big bet that if you're going to plunk down a couple $1 million to create a factory essentially to make a product that you've never even sold a single unit of. That's a bet that typically Wymans is not willing to make. And so, we look for co-packers and, right, wrong, or indifferent, that's our business model.
Oh, thank you, Pat. And Amber, would you share a little bit about some of the resources in the network? I think I saw you at the CEI Tastemakers Initiative one time.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a little bit about some of our landscape here in Maine.
Yeah, and as a startup, our journey's been a bit different because we've needed to find resources for business, startup, and innovation all along our path so far. So some of the earliest resources that were super helpful to us were the CDBG, Community Development Block Grant Program. That's a federal program that allows grant funds in exchange for job creation. The Slow Money Maine network was a source of both finance connections, but also mentors for me. The small business development centers of Maine are where you can find a lot of free business counseling and business supports. Those services are administered by coastal enterprises in the state of Maine. And as the food landscape in Maine changes dramatically, you're also seeing Focus Maine and other organizations take on support for food entrepreneurship. The University of Maine Cooperative Extension has been indispensable on the agricultural side, so that when our farmers have questions about organic process and weed management and varietals to try to grow for us, Ellen Mallory at the University of Maine and her team have been extremely helpful, as well as you and your team, Rob, at the Food Innovation Center for some of these new product development leaps that we're taking. The Maine Technology Institute has supported the infrastructure necessary on small farms for adequate post-harvest grain handling, storage, and drying. The Maine Manufacturing Extension Partnership has been a partner for us in figuring out how to be more lean and how to be more organized and systematic, if you will, about online order fulfillment. Currently the agricultural investment program through the state of Maine is going to be transformative when those grants are announced around major infrastructure initiatives that will happen in the food landscape, as well as the ag development grant program here in the state. And lastly, I'll say it's important, particularly for small food producers, I still consider us pretty small, to be aware of those technical assistance grant programs that are out there that can give you a little bit of money and make a big difference with a marketing consultant or a new website or whatnot. And so there are now TA grant funds in places like the Fair Food Network and the Maine Grain Alliance and our Main Street programs. And so those have helped kind of kick us along with a lot of our different needs over the years as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amber. Well, we're getting down to the last 7 minutes here. So I wanted to take an opportunity to check in with Tommy and see if we had any questions in our chat, and then just do a little bit of a closing, which I think Tommy's going to take us through after we do questions here.
Yeah, thank you, Rob, and great conversation thus far. We'll allow Patrick that lapse of multitasking, because I think he was actually answering somebody within the chat. I saw some banter going back and forth, and that is who our first question comes from. Representative Lynn Copeland asked, is lack of affordable housing having an impact on having enough employees for either of you?
Yes, for sure. Washington County is experiencing, I'm not sure what you're experiencing, Amber, but there are a lot of people that due to innovations like Airbnb, that a lot of people are coming to Washington County to rent housing. And so places that used to go to people who worked in the area are now turning into Airbnbs seasonally, and they make enough money off of the regional, off of the seasonal Airbnb that they don't need to rent out the facility the entire year round. So that pushes the geography out and out and out. And with gas prices the way they are and things like that, it's certainly having a very negative impact on us on affordable housing. So it's a challenge. The population in Washington County is not growing like other areas of the state. So it's going to be a big problem for Wymans and everyone else that does business in that part of the state, for some time to come.
Yeah, and I'll just echo the same challenge here in Skowhegan. Skowhegan just commissioned a housing study to understand the issues and try to work towards improving them. There's a mismatch between available housing stock and outdated housing stock and the needs of young professionals who might be single without a family, and making those spaces affordable. I think we have a 0.2% vacancy rate here in Skowhegan, and industry standard is more like 2%. So it's definitely a challenge. And one that as businesses, we are trying to see if we can be part of the solution and help solve. I mean, what the future holds for Maine Grains currently is that we're We're imagining 2 new buildings next door to our complex. We've secured land. One will be a building to expand our operations, and the other would be a building to help solve some housing and retail space needs here in town.
Yeah, and if I can piggyback on that, the other issue is once you do have the housing, you need internet connection, because it's very sporadic as to what's available where and when and how. And if you want a family to move to a location and you tell them that they're going to have spotty or no internet and limited cell phone reception and stuff like that, that's a really tough sell for a family.
Patrick, you're getting right into the core of all the Chamber's main tenets. That's a whole other webinar for another day, but you're spot on, my friend. We got a few minutes for a couple more questions. I'll try to go through some rapid fire if you guys don't mind giving us your thoughts. The next one is, you hear a lot about food innovation on more of a mass market scale these days. Think of like Impossible Burgers, Impossible Foods. From your perspectives, does innovation look different in the local food systems?
I don't think so. I think we're all trying to solve the same problems, and I think the plant-based initiative is something that really could help shape the Maine economy and really set us up for the future. But I think the problems that we're experiencing here locally are very similar to the national problems. Amber?
Yeah, I would say we've seen innovative things happen around getting products to market. Both blueberries and grains are staple foods. I don't see us playing in the Dippin' Dot market, for example, but I do see, we do need to follow food trends. Gluten-free has impacted our industry, not always in negative ways. So we do sell grains that are naturally non-glutinous. And people's beliefs around what is healthy and what solves their particular health needs is sometimes solved by other products we carry. So I think it is important to follow those trends and stay on top of the most efficient, economical ways to market.
Excellent. I've got 2 more quick and easy questions. I'm going to modify this one. What's your favorite Wyman or Maine grain product and a way to use them?
Well, my favorite way to use wild blueberries is to drive over to Two Fat Cats Bakery and have them make a blueberry pie for me.
I have to say my favorite Maine Grains product currently is our pastry flour, which is just buttery and lovely for pie crust and hand pies.
Excellent. And since it's not all about your 2 companies, what other companies in your market segment do you admire for their innovative work, and why?
I find that the people of Maine are, everyone here has a side hustle. Everyone is really, an entrepreneur at heart. And, I just love seeing what sort of happened over the pandemic. If there was ever an opportunity for people to say, this is too much trouble, I'm closing up shop, that was it. But you see new forms of delivery, new products, new executions, new ideas. It's been pretty amazing as to how people have adapted and thrived. Like we started a whole e-commerce business because we were trying to figure out how to get our products out to market faster. Look at Goldbelly. There's a ton of companies that are shipping through that. It's really been amazing.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback. I'm a huge fan of Brianna Warner's work and what's going on with kelp in Maine. It's so exciting. Huge fan of Go-In fermented foods and some of what we're seeing around innovation with how to turn these grains and beans into more value-added products like koji and fermented pastes and whatnot. So I think Mainers are just industrious and creative, and it bodes really well for the state's food economy here.
Well, thank you guys again, Patrick and Amber. What a great presentation, Rob, and thank you as well. Just a quick reminder that today's presentation has been recorded and will be available for replay on the Chamber's website and YouTube page. A copy of today's presentation, any additional details and resources will be included in a post-event email that you'll receive after today. And a quick plug for all of our upcoming chamber events. Please be sure to check the chamber website for all of our great events, and even better, sign up for our weekly event newsletter when you're there. Thanks again to our partners at UMaine for this first presentation of our 3-part series on food for thought. Join us again on Wednesday, June 8th at noon for our next workshop in this series, Rethinking Food Waste as Fuel for Growth. Thanks again for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you at our next event. And in the meantime, have a great day, get outside and enjoy your week.